you go.
Hey.
He is the Lord of hosts.
Amen. Amen. Well, again, good afternoon for those joining on the recorded side of things, but we just went through our introductions here, and we're going to just jump right into the agenda that hopefully each of you have in front of you. And so one thing, let me just offer this up front. I want to acknowledge, probably for most of you, this is a major, what I sent out to you earlier via email might have been like sitting down and drinking out of a fire hose or sitting down eating an elephant, and it may seem like a lot. I just want to acknowledge that it is a lot. The learning curve, I'll be blunt or frank with you. A year from now, you'll feel a lot better. Trust me on that. But here at the front end, it can feel a bit overwhelming, and some of the vocabulary or the nuances maybe seem like a lot to learn. All I can say is we're going to take it a step at a time, and we're going to learn this together, grow in this together. It's new for virtually everybody, including our executive bishop team as well as the LMC staff. But I feel like we're on a good trajectory, and excited to help do my part in leading this change as well. I'll just say up front today and going forward, we do have an intentional time of Q&A. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Absolutely no such thing as a dumb question. Probably the only dumb one, as I used to hear said already, is the one that's not being asked, because we all likely are sitting with the same kind of question. The other thing I would just say as we go through the agenda is you are here today because you've either been discerned, identified, or called or named by somebody up here, and you're here because somebody identified you or named you as a viable candidate for joining the LMC board. So any whispers that you hear in your ear of what am I doing here, or I am so far over my head, I don't know what I'm doing, I'd just say that's likely coming from the pit. It's somebody else saw otherwise, and I would just encourage you to lean in and just be obedient to learning together, and we'll grow together through this all. So that being said, Daryl, as our vice chair, has probably been it's been a joy for me to work with Daryl ever since I became a bishop, and I knew him before then, but ever since 2020, the last 5 years, to be able to serve alongside of Daryl as secretary as a bishop. Daryl is also new to policy governance, but he picked it up and is picking it up incredibly quick. And so I just thought I would just give him a few minutes to say how that you learned and navigated this learning curve that's before you. So Daryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Good afternoon. And Brian, I just put a question in the chat. I'm not seeing Lillian yet. It looks like we're missing her. So maybe while I talk, someone can reach. Oh, thanks, Marcia.
I picked already.
Okay. Thanks, Omar. Yeah. Well, thank you for those kind words, Brian. As I thought about this journey of policy governance, it connected to an experience that I had probably 10 years ago at Ephrata Mennonite School, where I taught. The administrator that I had was doing some intentional work with his board to try to bring a greater clarity and functionality to the board. And he used a phrase that I never forgot. And the phrase was, the board has one employee. And at the time, I'd never heard of policy governance, and I don't believe the school board would even say they've adopted policy governance, but that idea that there's a board and there's one person that they hire and relate to, and then whatever needs to happen, that person is given the authority to make happen, but is accountable for how it happens and what happens. And so that 12 years ago provided a framework for me to understand some of the language that I ran into into policy governance. And it created a really easy relationship for our school board. They weren't going to go call parents. They weren't going to meet with students. They weren't going to sit with teachers. That was the administrator's job. And if something wasn't going well, they would hear about it through the administrator. Now, the administrator has implemented a great pattern of lots of reviews and 360 feedback loops. But that was a helpful introduction. Getting into this process a year ago, something else that connected with me, thanks to Patrick Lencioni and his Working Genius model, I've learned that I get excited about opportunities to invent and to galvanize people. So if there's a need for an invention, it gets my attention, or a need to say, hey, let's go, we can do this. That gets my attention. And as LMC gathered last January to begin working at this, we had a retreat for a few days and got together and we were going to write our policy. We had been given this book by Ted Hall and had read that in preparation. So that gave me a little bit of context and understanding. I had also seen some of the frustration in the LMC system for, is this board work? Is this bishop work? Is this staff work? And as we gathered, it became an exciting process to say, let's invent a new policy manual and let's see if we can get everybody excited about it. So those were the two kind of motivations for me to lean in last year. And as we worked through the year, we first of all invented a timeline to help us make sense. And then someone said, well, we need a podcast. So Brian and I got to invent a podcast, and it's the first time that I'd tried podcasting, and maybe Brian's as well. And that made it easier to invent because there wasn't a standard that we had to meet. We just had to invent it. And it was for the purpose of helping everybody better understand so they could jump on the bandwagon. So both that also fit some areas that I really enjoy working in as well. And then simply monitoring that timeline throughout the year. There was reading to do and documents to create. And there was a great team to do it with. And that also made it a very palatable experience working with the officers of the board last year, as well as the executive bishop team members. So that's a little bit my connection and my experience. I think there's still some opportunity to invent and create and lay down the ways that will function, and an opportunity for us to figure out how to be on board and to lead this well. So back to you, Brian.
All right, thanks, Darrell. I'll offer this. This is something I basically I stumbled into this governance model just for my own context. About, I don't know how many years ago it was when I was invited to serve on the EMM board, to chair the EMM board, and they had just made a transition about maybe 3 years before that, 2 years before that, and there was going to be a transition in the board chair, and they wanted a new face to come onto the board. One that would not regress to their former model that they had used for the prior 100 years. And so I was recruited, or maybe drafted would be a better word. But I went on the board having zero idea of what policy governance was and how it worked. So EMM actually paid and sent me to Atlanta, Georgia for about 10 days to the Carver Academy over 2 different periods. And that was my immersion into the model, and it was sink or swim, and I was mostly sinking most of the time, and came back, and chaired my first meeting shortly thereafter. Probably something I would never do to somebody I don't even like very well. It was a lot, and the curve was really, really steep. But EMM survived, and so did I. But here we are. And so through this process, in my own context as a pastor, here at Weaverland. This is the model that we use here in my own context. And so I sit on both sides of the table. I sit here, we don't use the title CEO, but I sit here as a lead pastor. But this model is being used where I report and am accountable to a board, and now also chairing a board where others are accountable to the board, which I am privileged to chair. So I've sat on both sides of the table, and in three different this would be now the third organization I've chaired an EMM or a policy governance model. So it's been a rich experience, and now also to be the executive, if you will, with the end statements and having to write internal monitoring reports and to be accountable as the policy manual calls for as a lead pastor is also incredibly helpful. So I feel like it's really given me a well-rounded exposure and experience, as well as knowing some of the anxiety that can go with even what you're maybe sitting with as a board member or as the executive bishop team here today. So I sent out or included in the email, the policy manual itself, 44 pages long, no small document. I sent you the orientation document, 16 pages. The bylaws, I think they're about 9 pages, and then the calendar as well as the board roster. And we're going to touch base on a couple of those items. I know it's not very nice when they share a document, so I don't know if I can do that. I can share documents at certain points, but if you have those handy as well and you want to reference them as we go through it, would be great. I'll just start off with the orientation document. Just going to pull that up here. I'm assuming that by one. Why is it not doing everything it did for me before? Sure. Okay, there we go. So I hope you all read this. Maybe a better question would be, have you read this? Some nods, yes, no, maybe, yes. Yes, good, okay. I'm just gonna scroll down. Here's the basic on page 2 is basically the different models that are out there, and obviously LMC is here at number 5, the policy board model. But just simply want to call this out because this is what we're going to see when we get into the policy manual is the 4 different quadrants of policy, and this can be really confusing. But in a nutshell, when you look at the policy circle, we have 4 sets of policies. You have an ends policy, executive limitations. That's basically we're telling the executive bishop team what they cannot do. And then you have board management delegation. That's basically delegating power or authority. And some of that power our board is going to keep. We're retaining some power and authority. And then there's some power, a lot of power and authority we're giving away. But it's not without limits and it's not without expectations, which should be the ends. And so it's a very controlled delegation of authority and power with expectations. And then you have this, the governance process bucket or quadrant of the pie.
Brian, just
Yeah.
a quick question. Could you make the document a bit bigger?
Sure. Is that better?
That's
Could be
better.
better.
Thanks.
So then you have the governance process policies, and that's basically how the board is going to behave. We have our own thou shalt nots and how we're going to behave, and that we have our own accountability as well, we being the board. And so that's quite kind of it in a really, really quick nutshell. Um, and you know, the mixing bowls analogy is just simply that the policies build on one another. And so this would be the outer bowl here would be considered the global policy, and each quadrant, each of the quarters of the pie have an outer, what we call a global policy. And then the policies go in a little deeper, and some go in really deep. And that's basically how deep does the board want to speak to this policy. Some of them are just a one level policy, like a global with one policy. Some go really deep. Like if you go into the financials in our EL, some of them go pretty deep. We get pretty specific about some things about the board, about the exec limitations. So that's a really quick flyover. But the document, I wrote this document when I actually did it as part of a grad project. So I got credit out of this deal when I was going through grad school and on the EMM board. And actually it served me in 3 other organizations, LMC being the 3rd one here, but it really can be, I think, really helpful. On this page, I'll just reference this page here as well. Whoops. This is the annual agenda. And if you're looking for a boilerplate or something that you can look at one glance, and to me, this is one of the most important documents because it helps really break down the whole policy manual in bite sizes of what's going to happen each quarter. So when you look at our upcoming agenda, you'll notice some of these are in red and this is in blue. And the red is what the executive bishop team is going to be responsible for. And the blue is what the board is going to be responsible. And so come March the 20th, the executive bishop team, they're going to be responsible to bring what we're calling their bishop team report. We're not dictating to them what they got to report, but it's on the agenda that they're going to bring a report. They are, however, responsible for these 4, well, there's 4 ELs. I said that wrong. There's 2 E's, N's 1, and also the cultural equipment. There's 2 N reports that are going to give a report on. These two. And then there's going to be 3 ELs, exec limitations, that they're going to report on. EL2, the global one, the EL 2.1, and also 2.2 and 2.3. So there'll be a total of 4 of the ELs that they'll be reporting on. So they already know that, and they know how to begin to prepare for that. And then these are the other things that we as a board is going to be on our agenda that we need to work on. And it's slated in the agenda itself. I'm just going to pause there, scroll through the other part of the document here. You know, the whole idea of the why policy for LMC and also the board responsibility. This is all, maybe I'll just stop sharing that document for now. The board responsibility piece becomes, we're going to pick up on that here in the next, we get into the rhythms piece. I do want to share with you the policy manual itself. This, my friends, can be an overwhelming document. And everything I just talked about there about the pies or the quadrants, the policy circle is within this document. And tried to make this as navigatable and understandable as possible. And so when you look at the table of contents, you'll see the global ends, here on page 7. Then it gets into the executive limitations. There's 14 of them. You see the global one of EL2, and it goes down to EL 2.14. Those are reports. Those are what we're calling the executive limitations. What the board, we're telling the executive bishop team, thou shalt not, or you shall not do this. And it's always written in the negative language because we're not prescribing means. We're telling them what they cannot do. And so we have given to them the ends, these statements up here, what they must do or must accomplish. But how they get there is, all we're telling them is how not to get there. How they get there is going to be determined by them. The third section, then, this is also usually a short section, is how power is delegated, and then you have the governance process, which we have 15 of those, and that's basically how the board is going to function and behave. I'm just going to go into the glossary of terms really quickly, because words mean things. For example, you're going to be learning a new vocabulary. For example, bishop team used to be known as bishop board. That's a new word. The board used to be known as CEC, or Conference Executive Council. We're now going by board. You have board committees, and then we get into the policies and so forth. But this gives a real high overview of a glossary of words and so forth that you'll want to get used to or get to know, as well as this section here, what we're calling major decisions. You notice there's 13 of them. Right here it says 13 major decisions, and these are decisions that the board, we have delegated or determined by policy and also in our bylaws that we consider to be major decisions. And so these major decisions, these 13, in addition to board approval, it also requires bishop team approval. In other words, it's going to go to what used to be called the bishop board. And so it would be for these 13 items. They all would go to the bishop team for additional approval. It's just expanding our sphere of decision-making to the next level. Then we have 4 decisions that go to all other credentialed leaders. And that would be, for example, the adoption of a confession of faith, other than the 95 or using the 63. The merger of another conference or any change in the bylaws that goes to the full credentialed body. Other than that, it's all allowed between the bishop team or the board, or we've delegated the authorities to the executive bishop team to lead and to determine. Again, I want to acknowledge that's a lot to absorb, but this is, and the bylaws spell out some of these behaviors as well. You begin then on page 7. Now we get the end statement is simply 1 page long. There's basically 4 of them. You have E1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Only 1.2 goes to a second one where it identifies EMM as our mission partner. All the rest, this is probably the most basic, yet the most difficult policy within the document that typically when a board is wrestling with end statements, it's some of the hardest work it does is right here on this page. Most of the other policies in the executive limitations, the board management delegations, all the others typically are very, very objective. This page is very subjective because it's very open to interpretation. It usually doesn't go into really deep weeds. It's not prescribing any means, but rather where is the ministry or the organization supposed to go? And that's what this policy would go into. I think I'm just going to stop sharing here at this point regarding it's a heavy document. You know, you can scroll through it and it comes, you go the whole way through here to page 21 till you get to the BMDs, the board management delegation. That's not real long. And then you get into the GPs, the governance process policies. And this is again how the board is going to behave, and it goes through all its policies. This may seem a little bit, you will get this. I just want to say this as an encouragement to you. you will get this. We as a board are going to be looking at every single policy on all 44 pages at least once a year. At least once a year, we're going to be reviewing this. We're going to be talking about every single policy at least once a year. And so, over a period of a couple of years, you're going to say, oh, I remember doing this before. And it's very rhythmic, and it's also a highly, highly disciplined model. The very last page in the manual then is the agenda, which I had included in the orientation document as well. So that gives a real quick snapshot of what the document is all about. So maybe I'll just pause there. The bylaws I included as well, and they were adopted. They look like this, but they are about 8 pages long. The bylaws, you could say, well, what's the difference between bylaws and what's the difference between a policy manual? Great question. So bylaws are what I would call a decadal document. You should only be tinkering with bylaws every 10 years or so. They're looked at often and referred to often, you know them, but you're not tinkering with bylaws, maybe but once a decade in a healthy, in a healthy context. Policy, on the other hand, is looked at all the time and can change anytime. The board owns the policy, and the board can change policy at any time. Bylaws, as what I just got done sharing with you, not only does the board have to change and approve those, but that has to go to the bishop team, as well as to the credential body. A policy, that's all held within the board, and the board can change policy with the exception of the ends policy. Anytime the ends change, that goes to the bishop team to approve. That was something that came out from our review with the bishop board last year. And when you were sitting working through this stuff, was one of the bishops said, man, ends are so important. It seems like that ought to come back to the bishop board to approve. Said, good point. And so we added that in as one of the 13 decisions that comes back to the board. But yeah, bylaws are decadal and are really high level organizational. They talk about defined board size and term limits and that sort of thing. Policy is kind of the guts and the operations of the ministry, and owned solely by the board, with the exception of the ends policy. So maybe I'll just pause there. Any question or something that really lacked clarity that would be helpful now before we jump into the next section.
Brian, might I just add, and this is again a bit more of just a testimonial in this context, is that for me, I was not familiar with, knew of board this type of board policy stuff, but I had never been a part of it. And then when I joined as a bishop elder to be a part of EMM for the first time, I had to engage with this. And I just want to join with Brian in encouraging you. Don't expect to read through all these documents and feel like you understand them very well at all to start with. It is by walking through it. And actually, what I love about it, it's being a team together where you're kind of the overall stewards and you're learning your rhythm of how you engage with this together, because your ultimate goal is to make sure, and now I'm speaking as an executive bishop, to make sure we're getting done what we need to get done. But you're allowing us to do it the way we believe is the best way, unless we're not meeting ends. And so that becomes the place where you'll learn that rhythm. Brian is a good coach and guide in that, but don't sweat too much right now about trying to figure it all out. Let it be a part of a journey together as a team and be formed in this. And I would just really encourage you to say, we're really the stewards of this together, collectively as a team. And if you put together an 11 member soccer team and you put them out in the field, the first couple of times you'd be trying to figure out where the goal even was. You will figure out how to play together. as you walk through this versus reading a manual and then knowing what it is. This is really orientation towards a direction, and it's as you do it that you learn how to play the game. Is that fair, Brian?
Very fair, very helpful as well, Keith. I appreciate that. Your insight there.
Another thing I can add to that, Keith, is that for example, for people that they already know and understand bylaws and policy, also you can find out yourself struggling with this document that because you know how the process is, and you find yourself, okay, what is the changes here? What's going on here? So yeah, so like you say, to walk through and walk alongside, start getting it. So that will make the difference.
Thank you, Omar. This book, Ted Hall. Believe me, when I went on the EMM board, they gave me about a book that was about 450 pages long, and I mean, my word, I thought it was. I thought I might have a stroke trying to understand the book. It was a really hard read, written by John Carver, and John, a brilliant man, he just passed away last year. But anyhow, so we were used to give out the Carver book. Well, now Ted Hall, he's from Canada, but this book has been incredibly. It's it's about 120 pages long, and he writes in layman's terms. You will be getting this book. I neglected to mention this earlier. Marcia is preparing a notebook with, and this is going to be included here sometime this year. If we don't have these in stock, we'll be getting them, as well as the policy manual, putting everything together in one. Even though you'll have it electronically, but to have something in hard copy before you, I think is really important. But this book, we are going to intentionally read this book over the next year. But this is going to be hopefully a really helpful resource for you as well, just to help. Some it's just going to be repetition and living into it. It's kind of like getting on a bike, man. You're going to skin our knees, and you're going to be in the briar bushes and everything else. Sometimes you're going to fly off the road, and this is how it is. But then you do learn how to ride bike that way too, and that's kind of how this will be. So, Daryl, did you anything you wanted just to tag on to that last block there? Our time kind of flew there, and I just want to give you up.
No, Brian, I don't believe I have anything else to add. You did a great job.
Well, just since minding our time here, preparing for our first meeting and creating norms and rhythms. This is something that I would say burns really deep within me because this is a massive shift for LMC. The last thing I'd want to do is minimize that this is some sort of lackadaisical shift here. It's not. This is pretty major. And Miriam Carver, if you read any of her zingers, I included in the orientation document 69 of her zingers. I call them zingers. She was an incredible teacher. And she did virtually all the teaching. John was pretty well retired at that point, but I started writing these zingers down, and after bed, I got home after 7, 8, 9 days of this stuff. I started compiling them all, and there were 69 of them. I don't know why there wasn't 70, but there were 69 of them that I captured. And one of her zingers, she was a kind of, if you had her school teacher, just to give some context, Miriam was the kind of person that, one glance and you sit up straight and you listen. And I mean, she called on you, man, I would, even as a 50-some-year-old, I would tremble in my boots even when her glance shot my way. She was that kind of she carried immense authority. She knew what she was talking about, and you were paying attention. Well, anyhow, one of her zingers were, if you think that policy governance is not going to institute change, then you haven't thought through policy governance very, very thoroughly, and you're not ready for it. Something to that effect is how abruptly she said it. In other words, it is going to mean change. And I included in the orientation document, some of the bad habits of boards. And I have found virtually all those habits to be very true. I personally experienced being on really unhealthy boards. Probably many of you have it as well. And there's many boards that are highly dysfunctional. That's sad when you think about it. It's really sad. You know, you're thinking about pulling together gifted leaders, gifted persons, precious time, precious dollars and energy together. And to think of it as being really dysfunctional, that's really sad. And yet it happens again and again and again throughout ministries and organizations, wasting precious resource. Policy governance that LMC is going to be implementing is a highly disciplined and accountable model. It just is. And it has to begin with the board. The board must model high discipline and high accountability. And so I will just say, I'm going to drop another zinger here right out of the gate here from Miriam herself. An expectation of the board would be is your attendance. Miriam would say, any board member that misses 25% of the meetings in the course of the year shall have deemed to have resigned. That's how she said it. In other words, you miss one unexcused meeting. Okay, you miss two unexcused meetings, you are deemed that you have resigned. And that there's a lot of truth to that. I'm just gonna maybe set the expectation as for me, myself as chair, that I expect of you as board members. I grew up in a household where my dad was highly governance gifted. He chaired a lot of boards and some high level board, I would call high level boards. And so I probably inherited some of that from my dad. But one of the things my dad always, I would say, modeled really well for me is high honor. And honor is given by, first of all, being well prepared, well read, and present. And if you're not going to be present, then you need a signal to the power that be or the chair that, hey, for these reasons, I'm going to miss a meeting. And that's going to be the exception, not the rule. So we did communicate the board meetings, and I acknowledge that none of you gave voice to those dates. Going forward, we'll decide on those dates going forward for 2027 going forward. So you're kind of inheriting, and respectfully, I get it. You know, you're going to wherever on a certain date. Omar is going to be traveling. He already signaled to me on the one date for the March meeting. I get that, but you must signal if you're looking to be excused, you need to be excused. Otherwise, if you're not attendant, if you're not present, you're going to be deemed unexcused, and that is a problem. So that's a high, maybe that comes as a jolt to you, but that's kind of the starting place that I want to start at. And so the expectation would be is that your attendance is expected, and your preparation is also expected in that you read the board docket, you read the documents, and you prepared yourself as best you can for what you understand this place and point where you're at right now. But reading the docket is going to be the priority as well. And then the other part I would just add to that would be responsiveness. Since we're going to 4 meetings a year, 1 per quarter, that's not a lot. It's actually quite minimal. Now the meetings are going to be, as the agenda suggested, it's going to be 6 to 7, maybe 8 hours. We'll have the cut our teeth here and learn our way. If you're not going to be there in person, I acknowledge, man, that's a long Zoom meeting, and we'll take appropriate breaks. But that's a slog for sure. But to be able to stay present, camera on, present, cameras must be turned on. I think, again, to not have a camera on, with exception, if you're nursing a baby or something like that. I mean, but those are the exceptions. But either in person or you're present with the camera turned on. And then responsiveness. Occasionally, there's going to be actions that need to be taken between a meeting, just because we're only meeting every 3 months. And we have a policy. We have policies in place that we can take action in between meetings. And so when an email gets sent out by myself as board chair or coming from one of the executive bishop team through the board chair, it is critically important that there's a responsiveness within hopefully a day, 2 days at most, but that you either acknowledge, hey, I got the email, or yes, or that you weigh in and that there be a responsiveness as well. So those are just some fundamentals. Again, I included this in the orientation document about board behavior and expectations. But honor, I just think honor is just really important. Punctuality, I mean, this is common sense stuff. This is not rocket science. We should all know this stuff. But I just want to set the bar or the expectation up front. To be punctual, to be on time, to be present, to be well read, to be prepared as best as you possibly can is going to make it far, far more effective meeting for all of us. Ends up being a win all around, and we grow together and can best learn together with that as a kind of an expectation. Email protocol as a board. I'll just offer this because there's going to be things that we're going to be sharing as a board. Reply all, and there'll be some things that the executive bishop team is not copied on. I'd say pay attention to. Let me back up and say there may be an occasion where we are discussing something that is just among the board, and so pay attention to who's it addressed to. And always do a reply all. If it's to the board, do a reply all to the board. If the executive bishop team is included and we're asking for a conversation or dialogue to a question, do a reply all as well. In however the email have been addressed originally. So those, again, responsiveness and honor for one another and our time. That alone, just what I just got done saying, I think highlights how dysfunctional many boards are, where there's really low expectation, or whether I respond or not, nobody cares. Not in this model. Your voice, your participation is highly valued and also highly expected. And as you get to know me, I'm a super nice guy, I think. But I also, I'm not going to let you get away with checking out. I'm going to call you on it. So I just want to set the bar out of the gate, because a year or 2 or 3 from now, when I have maxed out my term, whoever picks up, going forward, I would really like the bar to be established and understood. And we can start on a good platform. I think it's going to be better for all of us. I would just share the okay, I take just a moment or 2 to share this, and that's the okay, sorry. This would be the tentative agenda. I say tentative because I want to have weigh in yet with the officers and the executive bishop team on this. But this is what our agenda will tentatively look like. You can see it's timed, and I just want to acknowledge I am a Swiss German, and so I can be kind of hardcore when it comes to minding the time, but we are going to start at 8:30 punctually, and we're going to have this serve us as best we can. We're not going to live and die by it, but at the same time, I build in what I think is reasonable times for adequate engagement. For example, you see here for the IMRs, that starts at 8:55 and it goes to 10 o'clock. And those are all going to be written and provided to you ahead of time. We're not going to read them verbatim at all. We're not going to read them. It's going into the meeting, assume that you have read everything that the executive bishop team has provided. And so we're going to be reviewing it and discussing it. But that allows basically an hour, and then you got to boast almost another, not quite an hour, another 50 minutes for their report. And then some of the stuff you see, it clicks along really quickly. Down here, you're going to see we have committee reports. We have three board committees, and they're all described in our policy. All of you are going to serve on a committee. And I'm going to pick that up here just briefly, because we're going to have to spend some time at our March meeting. I'll just go through the rest of this agenda here and then jump over to the board committee piece. You'll notice as we get down to the end, there's some things that you say, well, what is this? Every quarter, we're going to review a section of policy. So the first quarter, we're going to review all the policies that begin with number 1. That's ends policies. Guess what we're going to review in quarter number 2? Policies that begin with number 2, right? The EL, all the EL executive limitation policies begin with 2. So we're going to review them in second quarter. Third quarter, we're going to do the board management delegations. Fourth quarter, the governance process policy. You'll see here is a rehearsal. I'm going to write up, these are always fun, actually. I'm going to write up a rehearsal, and we're actually going to do a policy rehearsal. And the idea, I bet you never did this in a board meeting before, but this is because of the discipline of the model. We're going to actually do a rehearsal, a fictitious story of what if this happened? How are we going to navigate this? What does our policy say? And how are we going to navigate this? So that becomes kind of a fun little exercise to do. And then we also do self-monitoring every single meeting. How did we behave? Did we live into our disciplines that we have set before us? When we adjourn, we then go into 2 executive sessions. The first one, you'll see that Rodney and Marcia will join us, or Keith, or whoever's with us from the executive bishop team. They're going to join us for executive 1. And then we go into executive 2, and that's just the board only. They are excused, and then we meet in executive session 2. And then after that's done, we adjourn the meeting. I also want to just share the
Hey, Brian,
yes,
can we ask you a question?
absolutely.
On the expectation, you talked about, being absent and what is required to be. How about someone who's coming late into the meeting?
We shame them. No, I'm kidding with you. No, you mean if they come late to the meeting? Is that what you're asking?
If someone is late because he's running late and coming to the meetings, so what is the expectation on that?
I would hope it's an exception and not a rule. Tardiness, hey, this has been on the calendar for how long, and so you plan around that rather than planning the meeting around whatever other priority might be happening in your life or your world. So I would say the board meeting should be top priority for that day, for that month should be a top priority. Yeah, can you run late or you get caught in traffic? Absolutely, those things happen, but that should be the exception as opposed to the rule.
One of the documents Brian attached is contact information for each of us. So if you are in a position that you are running late, something unexpected happens, child wakes up sick that morning, just what Brian is asking is just shoot him a text, just communicate and be proactive in saying, hey, I'm going to be in 15 minutes late. Keep the communication going. That way that builds trust and builds understanding.
So thanks, Del. It's a really good point. on that note, just sharing with you now this other document that was sent. If you'll notice there's some blanks over here or under the cell phone contact, if you could either shoot them to me or let me know. I guess that would be from Lynn and from Paula, or the contact number. But one of the things that we'll have to do as a board, well, let me just back up and say, you'll notice here, Marvin Lorenzano. We have 11 board members, not counting Marvin. That's according to our bylaws. Marvin is serving by virtue of being an agency of LMC. So he is invited to our board, just like we have representation on EMM's board, which Keith mentioned earlier that he serves. So that is reciprocal, shared with Marvin as well. So Marvin sits on our board as a voting member. He's going to be in everything that we do as a board, but he is not counted in the 11. Then you'll notice down here you have Rodney and Marcia. They are the ones that are appointed to serve, to be representing the executive bishop team to the board. If we had one CEO, there would be that person. In this case, since we have technically 4 CEOs currently, they appointed 2 of them to be represented at our board meeting. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to establish terms, term start, term end, and that's going to be worked on by the board development committee. So you'll notice down here there's 3 committees, and they're described in the policy manual what they do. They're all very important committees, and we discussed this at the executive bishop team level regarding the chair. And Darrell Weaver is going to be serving as chair of the policy committee. It's a very, very critical committee. And Darrell, with the seat that he's sitting in and having probably the most experience next to me with policy governance, he agreed to chair that board. So we're going to be seeking a chair for the board development committee, and that's basically keeping the roster filled, working at terms, working at recruitment, and also working at education, the board education as well, that we're growing as a board. And so we're going to be recruiting that chair. And then you'll see that it says number 2, 3, and 4. All of us will serve on one of those committees. Maybe some of us might serve on 2, but most of us will, all of us will serve on at least one committee, including Rodney and Marcia. And then we have an executive benefits and stewardship committee, and this would oversee basically the kind of what it says, the benefits of our CEOs, our executive bishop team, and their benefits package, and then also the stewardship of the broader part of LMC that the board is responsible for. And Louis Kambamba, by virtue of being the LMC treasurer, currently would naturally sit on this committee as it's called out in policy as well. So this will be the next, probably one of the biggest things that we have to kick off and start here as we go into into March, appointing the chairs, the other 2 chairs, and then building out the committee. So I would encourage you as a board member, in the meantime, between now and our board meeting, is to read carefully the job descriptions that's in the policy manual for each of these 3 committees. And we want to put you where you're best suited, what's best in your wheelhouse. We don't want you to be serving like where you're just saying, man, I hate numbers. Why are you putting me or I hate policy. We want to put you where what best makes most sense. So read the job descriptions, and hopefully we want to have them as balanced as possible numerically, that hopefully there's going to be 3 to 4 on each committee, and then all have a chair, and then those committees will meet in between, whether in person or via Zoom, or even on the day of our board meeting. Would be something we can explore as well, whether we expand our board meeting to include a section of time that could include opportunity for our committees to meet as well. That's how EMM does it. It worked beautifully. They broke it over a 2-day period or a 1.5-day period, but that really worked well. I'm not proposing we do that, but it's something that we'll have to explore as we get into it. Well, I've been doing a ton of talking here. It's time for me to stop. and simply, we talked about transitioning to, just to questions and conversation. Said we do that at 4:10. It's 4:09. Man, we're right on task here. But yeah, I'm just going to stop here and invite you to engage. So yeah, just unmute yourself and raise questions or put comments, clarity, whatever it may be. Louis.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding the position where I am today as a treasurer of LMC. So I'm kind of a little bit confused. Maybe you guys can clarify me right now because everything is changing around. Am I part of the board only as a treasurer, or am I part of LMC as a treasurer of LMC? Because right now, we having like, Marcia and I has to sign checks, when the money goes out.
Right.
So I have also to put my signature on, and then I have to be sometime in a financial committee, talk to them, and then sometime we work with Marcia and Mindy to make this spending plan. So as we're moving in governing policy, how do you define my position right now?
Yep.
As a treasurer of LMC or as a treasurer in the board?
Great question, Louis. So maybe I'll answer it this way. So you're kind of in a weird spot right now. It is going to shift, or it is shifting, or it has shifted, maybe I should say, in January 1. It's just that we haven't fully lived into it yet. So you are an officer. So our board, the bylaws call for 4 officers. They must all be bishops. You are one of those 4 officers and designated as a treasurer. So you are treasurer of the board. Daryl is vice chair, I'm chair, and John Nisley is secretary. Those would be the 4 officers of the LMC board. Now, in the past, by virtue of being treasurer, you would have also did some check signing. That is going to change or shift in that if you read in the executive limitations, there's a couple of places where, depending on the amount of money that is spent, would require a second signature. And it would require either yourself as treasurer or, in your absence, the board chair. So there's only a couple nuances there that going forward that you would be required to sign checks, because that's really means work. That's really not board work. We're the financial piece, the executive bishop team, we've given that away and they're responsible for it, but also they're accountable to us. But there is a limit, an executive limitation. I don't know it off the top of my head what the amount is. I think it's maybe $25,000. So is that where it is? $25,000. Anything more than that, then you would need to sign for as a treasurer, just as a line of accountability. Going forward with the budget, you are invited by virtue of being a treasurer. The board treasurer is also invited to be a part or to attend the finance committee. The LMC finance committee is not part of the board. That's a separate, that is directed and led by Marcia, or by the LMC staff, I should say. The executive bishop team are charged with having a finance committee, and they give direction to that. But you, by virtue of being treasurer, you're invited to attend, to be present, and so forth. But that is all means work. And is that helpful, Louis? Hopefully getting to your question.
Yeah, I'm listening because it's kind of confusing to me right now. But I'm listening. You're doing good. Keep it up.
Okay, Marcia, more you want to add there, Marcia or Keith or Rodney, from your perspective?
Well, I think so. What will happen, Louis, is that we will take you off as being like you and I at this point are signatories. But I think we're going to add Rodney and Mindy. So we've talked about that, and we've talked with Steve Martin, our accountant. We just need to work at it with Everence.
So, Bishop Louis, when you attend a finance committee meeting, you would be there to attend, but you would not be there to say, well, the board says, or the board told you to, like you don't need to, you wouldn't be permitted to speak for the board unless we as a board told you, hey, next month at the meeting, convey this message from the board. You would be there as Lewis, not on behalf of the board.
Just listening, and then and then report to the board, or just for me, for my information.
Can you say that again, Lewis?
Now, when I go to that meeting and I'm just sitting there and listening, and then report to the board what I've heard, or what is it exactly?
Well, yeah, and actually they being the Marcia or the LMC, the executive bishop team, will actually bring like the budget, for example. That will be something they will present, but having your awareness or your presence there can help bring some context, but it will actually be, that will actually be the executive bishop team presenting the budget to the board. And then the board will ultimately, by virtue of their fiscal responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, will need to approve that.
In
Thank you.
truth, this is probably one of the bigger places we're going to transition, is have to walk through this. And we may not be able to answer all the questions right now, but just to say, Lewis, it will shift, and we'll just keep open communication with you on that shift. But for now, we'll have to live into it in many ways, because it is one of the bigger places of change in terms of how we've structured something in LMC.
Great question. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
Just a comment on that question from Lewis. Is he there as an ex officio? Because we're saying he has a role there just as far as a limitation, signing checks when they're over a certain amount. So is there a way to make it clearer for Lewis in his role and for the committee? Because it's a change.
Yeah, it will be going forward. I think probably the most significant change going forward is Marcia, maybe I shouldn't name you Marcia, but by virtue of her role at LMC right now, she will be calling the meetings and she will be leading the budgetary process. Lewis, technically, yeah, will be ex officio. He'll be non-voting. Because that is all led and directed by the staff. Lewis is essentially there, dare I say, by invitation. He could choose not to go as treasurer, but he's there by invitation and to observe and to participate as invited. But he will not be there speaking on behalf of the board or representing the board. Rather, the finance committee is basically serving the executive bishop team. And the executive bishop team then is reporting to the board. Hopefully, John, I hope it's clear.
With this change, then I'm no longer a treasurer for LMC in general, but I'm just a treasurer of the board.
You're not just a treasurer of the board, you are the treasurer of the LMC board. There's no just about it. I mean, your question really illustrates, one of the dysfunctions, I would say, of our former governance model and the way things got blurred. And that's a case in point right there. Would be, it can really quickly lead to the board or an officer being really deeply in means, operational means. Writing checks or signing checks is really operational means. And a healthy board probably shouldn't be doing that, but rather they should be, hey, where's the organization going? Are we achieving our goals? And as opposed to signing checks.
Lewis, if it's any comfort, you'll probably have better food at the board meeting than you did at the finance committee meeting. Just saying.
Are any of you, this is probably a really dangerous question, but are you has this been helpful, or you feel like, man, I'm actually a little more confused now than I was at 3 o'clock?
I think this has been very helpful. It's good to see all your faces. I really appreciated your history right up in the orientation because I haven't been part of LMC for too long. But I understand the grand shift that's happening, and I'm excited and praying along with you all. So I appreciate just seeing all the faces and being here and going through everything.
Thank you, Nan.
Hey, Brian, if you don't mind, I'm not trying to hijack the meeting because I was doing, also my participation on a grant committee and the deacon committee being as a treasurer. So with this new policy, do I have to continue that or just drop everything? Drop the ball?
I think I'll invite Marcia to speak to that if you're, or Keith or Rodney, because that would be some current LMC staff committees, correct?
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure how to answer that, Brian.
Well,
I mean-
it does, Marcia, it does require a re-engagement with this an understanding of policy governance, which we're still growing in our understanding. But in that context, there may well be that committees are formed that have a number of bishops on them because the bishops are kind of the extension, or pastors are extension of LMC as a whole. And it wouldn't necessarily just be on the current staff, but it may be those that are connected. But we still have to figure that out because that's a whole new road to travel down. And so Louis, probably a lot of your questions we can't answer right now, but we will as we live into it.
So
You're muted.
am I allowed to go to the meeting until we figure out what's going on?
Yep, there you got the thumbs up, and
Yeah, I think Mindy would appreciate that. If you could be at the meeting until we get some of these things figured out.
Yeah,
You're
because I don't.
asking really good questions.
Yeah, I don't want my chair to write me off.
So one of the distinctions that might be helpful to mention here is for those of you that are on this call as bishops, we are here as a board today paying attention to ends. But when we attend bishop team meetings, then the executive bishop team who leads that meeting will be talking to all the bishops about the means that we need to help with so that they can report that the ends are being accomplished so that the board is happy. So for those of us that sit on this board, but also in bishop team, we will wear two different hats. In this meeting, we'll be wearing our ends hat, paying attention to the future and how are the ends being accomplished by the executive bishop team. But in bishop board, I'm sure we will feel leaned on by the executive bishop team to help them accomplish the means that are necessary to get the ends done. So in that case, Louis, there still could be this request from the executive bishop team that, hey, we should have a bishop to sit with the deacon committee. We should have a bishop to be on the grant committee. And that very well could be you because of your role of treasurer and you're currently there. It's just that you're not giving direction as a board member in those meetings. You're engaging purely with the means in that meeting.
Mm-hmm. It's a really helpful distinction, Darren. I would just say it was a hard learning curve for me being a board member. And when the board is convened, we speak as one voice. So it's this stewarding together of this, not away from this meeting. We're not, in a sense, functioning in those places. When we're in this meeting, we're all wearing our board hat, whoever you guys are that are part of that. What's hard is when you step out of this meeting, you still have the ears of a board member, but your function, because you're bishops, because you're pastors, you are engaged fully in the means. and you're one more of the participants in that. And that's a really hard one to know, which hat am I wearing? And so you have to kind of be aware of the fact that you do wear different hats depending what meeting you're sitting in. And again, that for me, in fact, they probably got mad at me at one point in the board meeting because of how hard it was that I couldn't speak to Marvin about things related to, how he could get the ends accomplished in something when I was just in my normal relationship, EMM to LMC. And it was clear. Like he had just said, you can do that, Keith. You just have to say, I'm wearing my LMC hat right now, not my board hat. And so I was able to grow into that, but it takes a kind of a discipline in that context. And so what you're talking about, Lewis, is you may well be involved in some of these other things in the future, but you'll be doing it with a different hat on than the hat you're wearing when you're a part of this board.
And that's why it's a big shift and hardcore in that case, especially for us that we've been functioning as a board and this group and having some kind of role and something if shifting like, okay, so where I'm playing here. So that's why it's a little more difficult probably for those that they just join, but for those that been playing some roles in here. So yeah, I think is that playing in the role and working together. So not having respond for all the questions. And maybe in 1 year we're going to say, okay, that's the idea. But actually, I always say that I have to be patient with yourself. Sometimes I have to be patient with myself for the things that I don't understand, but I don't have to be hard with myself also in that case. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Daryl. Really great insight. The hats we wear. And that's really, I think, what some of the tension that you're going to feel, Lewis, here in this change or this shift as a board treasurer from the LMC treasurer to a board treasurer. You'll acknowledge some of those hats are going to feel a little bit differently. But the bishop board reality and how I attend or any bishops attend bishop board or bishop team meeting is we got to know what hat we're wearing. And because we are going to be in means because of the invitation of the executive bishop team. And that's what, even when we pursued policy governance for LMC, the reality of having 3 or 4 CEOs, as it were. Normally there's one, but here in LMC's case we have 4. That's a nuance, but it's determined in the board management delegation, and we've delegated the authority, and now they divided it up. There are different responsibilities among the 4 of them. So. And it's all done through policy. So anyhow, other thoughts or comments? I know we're getting up against it here, but I do want to make sure that we're offering adequate time here for any additional questions.
Communication question, Brian. How are we going to communicate in the future, like this year, to the conference, to the credentialed body, our policy governance model and bylaws, so that they're going to understand? Are we going to make them accessible on the website? Just some of those questions on accessibility and communication to the broader LMC constituency.
Yeah, really good question, John. I don't know that I can answer that other than we probably follow past patterns, but maybe this would be an opportunity to improve or expand those past patterns. I think bishop board meetings were generally just to bishop board. They would give some summary minutes, remember from years past, that were provided publicly to credentialed leaders. But is that even happening? I don't think it's happening now anymore, is it? I forget what they call, like executive minutes. I forget what they used to call them, but some summary minutes. But
Yeah, that's not happening anymore. However, we did have the Constitution on the LMC website, if I heard part of your question there, John. So, yeah, I don't know who, I guess this board decides if the bylaws go on the LMC website. I believe the policy manual is an internal document, so that would not be made accessible to everyone. Am I right on that, Brian?
Yeah, that would be, not that we're hiding it, it's just that it's a internal board document. I would imagine it being accessible to, certainly to the bishop team and to persons who could benefit by having it, but would not be a public document.
I think John's question is appropriate in that context because the sequencing of communication, the greater level that this team is starting to understand their role, the more that lies into the place of being able to find how much we communicate. Because if you communicate and the board doesn't know what they're doing, you create a potential challenge in that process. So you kind of have to sequence those pieces of where that's at. And we're really in a major learning curve, and we could find ways to communicate of entering into that learning curve and upcoming communication as things become clearer. But I would be cautious about giving too much information out and crashing the system with people being confused about what it is.
Good word, good word. I'm going to be very respectful of the time. Oh, go ahead, Nan.
I was just going to say our next board meeting is before, is this correct? The leadership Zoom that is happening. Is that right? So that's good because then at that meeting, there can be a little more, just a note.
Yeah, good insight.
Hey, Brian, are we getting all the document on a hard copy at the first meeting?
Say that again, Louis.
Are we getting all the documents, policy manual, everything that we have on the table? Are we getting that on hard copies?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a notebook prepared for every member. And I've also ordered copies of this book so that everyone have a copy of this book and a notebook with the bylaws and the policy manual in it and the calendar.
And I would suggest including the orientation document as well.
Will do. Yep,
Perfect.
will do.
One last thing I don't think we talked about at all, but Sherry, I think, has been in touch with all of you regarding the email address and getting access to the docket. The docket will be populated and you'll get access, a link to that here in the coming week or weeks. But normally the docket will be fully populated at least 1 week, a minimum of 1 week before the board meeting. So that's the goal, or that's the objective, that it would be fully populated. So you have a whole week prior to the board meeting to read all, access and read all the documents. I think I am going to land the plane here just because I want to honor our time that we talked about. Daryl, I'm going to turn it over to you if you don't mind, any things that you want to button up here and maybe to close this out.
Sure. Thank you so much for attending on Zoom today and engaging. And I was just thinking through, if you have a device that you can bring to board meeting, that would be great, along with the manuals that we'll get the hard copy version of. If you need help setting up your email on your device, such as creating a bookmark for the drive so that in the meeting you know exactly where to go for minutes and past documents, we can try and take some time at our first meeting or over a break to make sure you're set up and good to go if you feel like you need some help with that. I know we've lost time in previous meetings saying, okay, find a document, and then, oh, well, where's that email? Or, well, where's that drive? Well, where did you put that? I can't find. So it'll be worth our time to make sure we're all up to speed and have a good, succinct way of finding what we need to. And Sherry can help with that. I'm willing to help out with that too if you have any questions when we gather for our first meeting. So, Brian, thank you. You recovered quite well from the curveballs that Zoom threw you today. So thank you very much for leading us through that. And we'll look forward to continuing to learn a whole lot together. Let's pray. God, you have given us all kinds of hope by saying that you are going to be Emmanuel, God with us, and that the government is on your shoulders, and that you're not the author of confusion. And so I thank you for the ordered way that you relate to us and that you've created us and for the ways that you have blessed rhythm and placed into the fabric of creation cause and effect, and these systems and processes that, when followed, can bring about good results. And I pray that as we learn some new ways and new places of doing that, you would take our hand and lead us forward and help us to do that courageously, and help us to learn to know one another in really helpful ways, that we can feel like we are on the same board together, and we can confidently speak with one voice where we need to do that. In Jesus' name, amen.